back to another gathering of the Fractional Forum. You guys, you notice we have a guest today. This is so exciting. We've been telling people for like weeks that we are going to have guests on the show, and we finally do. So we're really excited to welcome Kwan into the conversation, who's going to be representing the finance angle in our conversation today. So Kwan, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you. We also have our regulars there, Tim and Keith, representing HR, sales, and tech. We sadly do not have Lindsay joining us today to represent ops, but we'll take it. We'll take a gamble with our ops knowledge. But it's probably best to follow up with Lindsay. If anything comes up today and you have specific ops things that you'd like to explore in those arenas, definitely connect with Lindsay. Okay, friends. So I've been thinking about this, and I want to make sure that we are framing our themes for the day into the overarching reason for being for the Fractional Forum is that how do we become solved? And we talk about a lot of things on this show that aren't really like you can have a solution for them in a moment, which is the benefit of getting into the conversation. And our conversation today is another one of those. So today we're talking about mastering uncertainty. So from a fractional point of view, what is our role in mastering uncertainty? How does that contribute to ourselves as individuals, as fractionals and business owners ourselves? What does that look like with the clients that we're dealing with? How can we bring those skill sets to our clients, to the teams that we're working with? What are the challenges of that? What are the limitations of that? What are the benefits of that? All the good stuff in the mastering uncertainty arena. And I mean, I don't know if everybody knows that, because I don't know if everybody who tunes in is from Calgary, but like we're all in Calgary. There's a lot of uncertainty that's been created in the Canadian economy based on some political moves by our neighbors, which we don't have to dive into today. But the point I'm making is that there's a lot. I mean, there's always uncertainty, but particularly there's a lot of uncertainty right now in our economic climate. There's also a lot of uncertainty, I think, in general for fractionals, because every time we come in and we're doing something at least probably minutely different, if not substantially different, for the different clients that we're working with. And there's can be a lot of uncertainty that comes with that as well. So if you are joining us live today, we would love to hear your voice as part of the conversation as well. So get in the chat. Let us know what's making you feel uncertain right now. What are some of the things that you've experienced with clients? What are some of the things that, if you're tuning in and you're a CEO or business owner, some of the things that you're experiencing just in terms of the questions that you've been asking yourself? And we can talk about them today on Fractional Forum. So with that, Fractional Forum crew, what is coming up for you? Where do you think we should start for today?
So I'll jump in if you don't mind. I think that I'm going to challenge the topic of uncertainty a little bit right off the bat, where I feel like everyone looks at uncertainty as a really bad thing. I think that if you say uncertainty, people all of a sudden come to all these negative emotions, these things that are bad things. I feel like, and I might just throw this out here, and I'm curious to everyone's perspective, that a lot of people actually are attracted to kind of the fractional work or to doing some more contract or augmented work based on the fact that they actually thrive in that uncertainty and love it a little bit, right? There's some people, like when you say certainty to me, it's almost like a scary thing, right? Like I think that if you tell me that for the next 30 years that from 9 to 5 I'm going to be doing the exact same work and tasks every day, that would be my nightmare. And so I think that uncertainty is actually a really exciting thing that gives people energy, or myself energy. What are some other perspectives on that?
Yeah, I would add to that, actually. I had like a personal experience with a lot of uncertainty last year. And I have 3 mentors that I work with. And I remember one of them saying to me, like, you need to see this as like a silver bullet. This is poking holes in your business. And so you might as well take care of it now rather than later when you're quite large and it's a really big mess and a big deal, right? So it actually gave an opportunity to see where there was some gaps in my business. And I think, of course, that reflects onto every business. That uncertainty creates a space where you can see where there's some opportunity to refine processes, perhaps, or look at your marketing strategies, maybe look at cash flow, how you're doing there, whatever aspect, technology where you can amplify it, your sales funnel, like where your customers are coming from, all of those things where you can actually take some space to see where you can do a little bit better.
Yeah, I feel like I fall into the camp with you, Keith, is that like I get bored very easily. And so like the variety and the uncertainty is something that I thrive on. I think that's common too for people who consider themselves to be growth-minded people. In that kind of like what you were saying, Vered, that the uncertainty presents opportunity. And if we were living in full certainty all the time, where would opportunity come from? Just quickly welcome Bala to the conversation. Bala, welcome. We're here. We're glad to see you in the conversation. Feel free to add your perspectives on uncertainty as we go along. But I would love to actually go to Quan on this, because from a financial perspective, I feel like there's different conversations that happen from a dependability or certainty point of view. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I want to just start by saying, I'm a bit different. I look at everything holistically and I have more of a philosophical angle on things, and obviously the finance stuff will just kind of fall out of it. But when I look at certainty versus uncertainty, it's two sides of the same coin. It's the whole polarity concept. You've got your negative, positive, hot, cold. They're all just varying degrees of the same thing. And what's important is when you look at it, you could take the perspective, like you said, Vered, you can look at it positively or from the opposite angle. And what's powerful is if you look at uncertainty from a positive angle, from an abundance and growth mindset, you see a lot of opportunities. For example, with the uncertainty in the markets right now, I'm making money off of it because I know how to capitalize on the opportunity. And every business has this sort of opportunity right in front of them. And from a finance angle, like, what is uncertainty? It's just, we just don't know what we don't know. And that's why we have experts like us to help navigate what that uncertainty is, to bring that clarity, identify the issues, the impact, helping you rank and prioritize it. But working with professionals who have that abundance mindset will help you reframe something that we think is negative into a very positive thing. And that feeds really good energy into not just you, but your entire organization. And it changes how you approach your business. Mm-hmm. Right? So with us, once you have that mindset and you know where you're going, you know the opportunities you're going after, and it's not just risk mitigation, you can chase opportunities and capitalize on it. That then flows into what you're forecasting for your business, the resources you need, the capital you need to raise, the excitement you can generate around your business. And all the other fractional professionals who come to work within the organization will get energized and charged up and bring their skill sets and expertise to the table to help bolster everything, take it to the next level. So yeah, it starts with a mindset and how you see things, how you perceive things, and how you choose to process and react.
I like what you're saying. Oh, go ahead.
I think the theme that I'm hearing and what everybody's saying is that relying too much on certainty leads to complacency. And that can be a death spiral in times of uncertainty, because what you did before isn't going to work in this new era. So having that mindset that you just talked about, Quan, of looking at the situation as, how do I create opportunity out of this? How do I generate conversations out of this uncertainty that's there and take advantage of it, is what's going to lead you to a better place. And everything Vered said a minute ago is, I can look inside too and just go, where do I have some holes? Where do I take this opportunity to kind of go, I got to plug some of these things that are causing holes in my ship so that I can keep sailing and sail through this storm that is going on and get to the other side.
Yeah, I want to go to the audience quickly here too, because there's a couple of great comments. William is sharing, if there's always change, plus minus question mark, then uncertainty plus minus question mark will be there as well. The challenge is that we're often unclear on the centric purpose as well as the communication is that's associated with that. So I think that that's really important part of the puzzle too, because we said we were talking about starting with mindset, but there are things that roll out of those mindset components. When we never talk about purpose on this show ever. Just watch any of the episodes and we always talk about it. But Quan, one of the things you mentioned was this, and Tim, you mentioned it as well, is this ability to, like, I don't like the phrase take advantage of. I like to use the word harness, but like harness the opportunity into something. But there's lots of things that could present themselves. And if we don't have good clarity on that purpose of where we're going and why we're going there, and where we would go versus where other people would go, and what opportunities we would harness that other people wouldn't, then we don't really know how to harness that as an opportunity because we don't know where we're hoping to take it. It's like roping a horse and then you like get it and then you're getting dragged along and then you're like, oh no, did I mean to do that?
That's
if
the very
we know we
Calgary.
mean to do that, then it's awesome. If we don't know we mean to do that, then that horse could take us in a really wrong direction. And Bala is also saying here, as humans pre-plan their lives and work, the uncertainty can be harnessed. So I think that's an interesting part of the conversation, because I have a mentor who always says, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. But I also believe, actually, what the title of the show today was inspired by a book that I read called Mastering Uncertainty by Matt Watkinson. And one of the things that he posits in the book is that what you learn in the planning is the valuable piece of planning, in that, but because of uncertainty, almost no plan actually goes to plan. I mean, if anybody has ever traveled, you probably get that. And so there's a relationship between this insight we get from the uncertainty, if we're looking at it as an opportunity, and the ability to pre-plan. And then there's a continual relationship of those two things. It's like a dance almost, right? Like they dance back and forth with each other. So does anybody have any thoughts or like personal experiences that they'd like to share in that relationship between like harnessing uncertainty, but also turning it into a meaningful plan?
I want to just start with the plan aspect that you were just talking about, Tracy. I had a conversation last week with a special operator from the U.S. Army last week. And he was talking about planning. And you can imagine in the area that he works in, nothing goes according to plan. But planning was so important to what they do that when they go and something happens out in the field, they have something to come back to and discuss against the plan. Okay, that didn't work. Let's make adjustments. That did work. Let's make different adjustments. But it gave them that common place to go back and have that conversation. And that, I think, is why planning is so important. The other part that I wanted to build on was a couple of times I've been working with clients and there was significant leadership change. That in both cases I'm thinking of, it directly impacted what we were working on. And with this leadership change imminent, people were wanting to just stop. And I shook my head. I'm like, why is this suddenly a bad idea? Because we have some uncertainty. Let's keep going. Let's have a conversation with the new leader and let's make adjustments. In one case, we made 0 adjustments. It was the absolute right path to go on. And he's like, yeah, we needed that capability yesterday. Like, let's get it done. And in the other case, there was some adjustments. But that's just keep executing the plan and have those conversations, have that base to go back to look at the plan and go, what adjustments do we have to make based on this new information?
I like that concept, Tim, of like this central place to come back to. And I think that is a really interesting way to look at a plan, so that it's not like we're expecting all of this to go exactly as planned, but we are using it as the central location where we were like, thought this, either that manifested or didn't manifest based on our actions. Now it's the place we come back to review, to evolve, to make change. I really like that concept of how we could look at a plan.
We can't control everything in our business. That's really what it comes down to. And, we try our best to mitigate risk. And it is important to plan. Like, we have pandemic plans, we have emergency response plans, we have risk registers in organizations. And those are really important because, if you take a look at all the things that we've talked about on the Fractional Forum, like roles and responsibilities, communication protocols, it allows that space when you're planning to build those mechanisms of everybody knowing what their roles and responsibilities are, the communication protocols. So those things happen, and maybe we didn't cover all of the risks or all of the scenarios, but people are empowered to step into those roles and problem solve. And that's really what mastering uncertainty is about, is stepping into those situations, knowing what your role is, and allowing your people to use their resources and skill sets to figure it out.
The other piece I want to add is when you're developing a plan and you know what your decisions are, what's important to an organization is that you're making decisions that are based on the values of the organization. Whether you know it or not, when you're going through the process of making a plan, you can be subconsciously or consciously incorporating these values in these measures that you're trying to respond to, right? So making sure that that's consistent across the organization, it impacts the effectiveness of the organization, and making sure that you're always embodying the values of the organization. So I just want to highlight that and how critical that is.
And I think to build on that as well, Quan, there's a book that I'm in the middle of, and you probably know this, maybe even read it, with Ray Dalio. It's called Principles. And so he was the founder of Bridgewater Bank, super smart guy. And part of this book talks about this idea of coming up with these set of principles to deal with some of the uncertainty, and a playbook to essentially apply to all of these different scenarios, so that you have more of a mathematical approach to dealing with that uncertainty as well. So that, in line with what you're saying from a values perspective, if there's a certain way that you're always going to deal with things that fall into this bucket, and a playbook and a set of values and a set of frameworks you can empower your team and people with, over time, statistically, you will make the right decisions and the net positive decisions that are going to be in line with that value of the organization. And so I think the idea of also being able to have a strong sense of principles, a strong set of, okay, well, here's how we approach uncertainty as an organization, because it might be really different for Walmart versus Deliver Digital, right? Like we're gonna have a different framework and a different set of principles for how we approach things. And I think defining that as an organization and empowering your teams with that as you grow is incredibly important too.
And I think it's really interesting. Again, like, I love these types of things when they come out on the Fractional Forum, because if you look at your communication policies, internal mandates, any kind of documented, it's interesting to talk about the principles, because I think very commonly we use things like values and mission. And I think it can be very easy to get disconnected from those things if they're not like the lived values. And the concept of principle, like, this is what we're going to do. These are our principles. This is how we show up. It's an interesting relationship with values. But also, like, do we have, I'll be honest and say, I don't know that any of the organizations I've worked with have like protocols for dealing with uncertainty, just in like that specific language. And it's interesting. So LinkedIn user, I'm not sure who you are, but if you'd like to share who you actually are in the chat, because sometimes it just doesn't pull it over, we can give you credit for your wonderful thoughts. But is sharing that certain uncertainty often creates fear with clients. I agree that we can help clients turn this into an opportunity. Change management is also super helpful during these times. And I think too, this concept of the like uncertainty principles for the organization can help both with even just that concept, right? Like if we were going to say we are, oh, it's Wendy. Hello, Wendy. Thank you for sharing. If we were going to share, or if we were going to say from an organizational point of view, like we are afraid of uncertainty, then there's probably other things that we put in place to deal with that. But if we're having that conversation, let's say during an interview process, or maybe we even put it on our website because we're bold enough to say it, we celebrate uncertainty. This is what it looks like to celebrate uncertainty. These are our celebratory practices. Here's the other practices, change management and things like that are related to that, communication plans and those types of things. But like, it would be interesting to go into an organization as a team member, whether that's fractional or an employee, and know like, oh, they're like really big on like being bold. And I mean, these are the things also that are interesting too. And like, how does this connect to your values? If innovation is one of your values, you haven't really talked about what that means from an uncertainty point of view. How do we bring that to the world? Also, okay, so you guys are killing it in the chat today. We don't even have to have any conversation. You guys are doing all the work. This is great. William is also sharing, this is a really great point. I think there's a distinction between uncertainty and instant uncontrollable disruption. I think this is true. We often conflate sudden disruptive events like a pandemic with uncertainty. However, uncertainty is more rational, while disruption can amplify, oh, it doesn't show all of it, but I can read it here, can amplify irrational reactions. This distinction underscores the need for mindset sustainability, recognizing the spectrum between fixed and growth mindsets. Oh, does anyone want to jump on that?
I do. I want to jump on that because I agree 100% with what William just said here, right? Is those are different things. I will say I think they're on the same spectrum, disruption being on the very extreme end of that. And I really like what Kwan said a little bit about that mindset thing is you are dealing with uncertainty every single day. You have that mindset of how do I deal with that? Disruption is a crisis. We need to put all hands on deck, figure out how we deal with that. But you've built up some of those muscles in dealing with uncertainty. And you're able to kind of go, okay, this is massive. We need to really strengthen and flex those muscles that we built up and deal with the disruption that's in front of us. I think, Keith, to what you were saying about principles, gives you some guidelines on how we're going to deal with that. And those are really important. I kept thinking about when you're talking about principles, I always forget what it's called, but there's that red car syndrome. You buy a red car and then suddenly you're seeing red cars everywhere. Defining your principles, defining your ideal client profile, your ICP helps you see those red cars everywhere. And that doesn't matter if it's good times or uncertain times or disruption. You have those kind of guidelines. You have that eye out there looking for those opportunities that fit your principles, your organization, your skills, and what you can deliver on.
Yeah, I just want to also add, uncertainty and disruption is different for every person and every organization. So if something's uncertain for you, it may not be uncertain for me because maybe I've dealt with the challenge before. Maybe I've done the work to know how to navigate the uncertainty. So because I have more clarity, it's no longer uncertain to me. But if you haven't done the work and you're stuck in that fixed mindset, yeah, you're going to be perceiving it much differently. Also, in the tech space, if I'm coming up with new technology, something that's groundbreaking, I'm the disruptor. Do you think I'm going to be the one being disrupted? Probably not, right? So just realizing that reality changes how we look at things, certainly.
Chris McLeod is confirming that it's called red car syndrome.
Okay.
Sometimes
So I don't have to scratch my head anymore about what it's called.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chris.
I'm just going to add, I actually don't think you cannot function in our world with a fixed mindset anymore. I mean, just right after the pandemic, there were so many of these seminars about, our new reality of functioning in this VUCA world. And we're seeing it. We're seeing the level of disruption escalating, and it's not an option anymore. We have to just roll with it. And the expectation is we are going to live in this world of uncertainty for a very long time, and we have to adapt.
Yeah,
Are you guys noticing that the pace of change is increasing rapidly over just 100%. Even the last 10, 15 years? I've just noticed that the rate of it has picked up substantially.
I think there is a graph of that somewhere.
Yeah, well, I was on a panel like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, and I'm trying to remember who to give credit to for this line. But they talked about the idea that the pace of change is fast today, and it's as slow as it's ever going to be again. And I think that a lot of these tools that are coming out, a lot of these accelerations are just happening faster and faster and faster. And without diving too much into the tech weeds, like you're seeing things from like Microsoft and their new quantum chip, which was essentially like a new state of matter that they created, like in the last weeks and months. The AI evolution and kind of the battle between some of the actual geopolitical side of things on the AI side is just absolutely bonkers. And the amount of dollars that are being poured into this is larger than the GDP of most countries. And this is the technology side of things that's driving a lot of this uncertainty. You have a lot of the political things that are driving uncertainty. The world is changing really quickly, and I believe that we're starting to see the impacts of that. And Barrett, I'd be curious on your perspective from an HR and people side of things. And there's so many different people that have had maybe traditional career paths that have spent the last 25, 30 years building in a certain way, and are arriving in their point, and they're looking at kind of the back nine of their career and being like, holy crap, I don't see that path in the same way anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think that whole labor market is being just turned on its head. And so I think that things like fractional, things like these different and alternative ways of both consuming expertise but also delivering it are really, really becoming more prevalent and starting to shape the market differently.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it in enterprise organizations where it's like death by 1,000 cuts, and layoffs are happening very frequently in these large organizations because they've had to pivot, and they just don't have that agility that a smaller organization does. What I see with my small business clients is that the span of control for each individual is much broader than it ever has been, because it has to be. They've got boots on the ground. They have the ability to see so much more of what's happening in the industry. And so you have to give them the ability to shift, to change, to explore those opportunities because it serves the business well. People aren't just siloed anymore or have the blinders on and have very clear roles and responsibilities. You have to have a broader sense of control and autonomy to do the work because they're problem solvers. It has to be that way because organizations need to adapt much faster.
So can we talk about this? Because I feel like we've mentioned this ability for people to be problem solvers a couple of times. And I think from a fractional point of view, a lot of us identify as problem solvers. So we go into an organization, they have a problem, we're coming in to solve the problem. So I think it's common for us to identify as problem solvers. But I also see that maybe the skills don't exist within a lot of organizations for people to have the practice to be problem solvers, for them to have the identity as problem solvers. I mean, it's interesting, Barry, because what you said was people just have to be like this.
Well, they really do.
I mean, our education system isn't really teaching them how to be. We're not here to talk about education, but this also happens. I've done a lot of conversations with the UFC business students lately. And when we go to school, it's very, very formulaic, right? I give you a curriculum, I execute the curriculum, you spit back to me the curriculum, we do that again for a whole bunch of courses. And what we are teaching kids to do is consume and repeat. which is not the same as problem solving. And so I think this is also an interesting piece of the fractional puzzle, because if you are a problem solver, you come in identifying as problem solver, but you're maybe going into an organization where there's not a lot of skills of people internally being problem solvers.
I'm going to challenge your comment though, because I think I recall from university, and funny enough, something I just told my son the other day, because he got the flu and he missed 3 days of high school last week, and he was panicking. And I said to him, the greatest thing that I learned in university is to leverage my network. It wasn't anything else. I don't even remember my econ degree, but I do remember that I would find the people that did the course before, and I created a communication channel, right? Essentially. And I found a way to problem solve and to leverage the skills.
So
is
a problem solve? Maybe we are all naturally problem solvers. Are we all naturally problem solvers? That'd be great.
Well, I think, okay, so if I take a step back and I think about, first of all, like, let's create the environment in a workplace where people can have those conversations, where, we talk about psychological safety. How do we create the space for people to actually problem solve, to have the conversation, to bring up the issues that they see in the workplace? That's where it needs to start. Because as Tim said, you have to build that muscle, but it needs to start from somewhere. And it starts with the conversations. And then it starts with people connecting with one another to try and solve the issue. And they do that repeatedly as scenarios come up, and it's building that muscle.
I'm a big believer in the social connection in organizations too. And this can be a problem in bigger organizations, that sometimes people just don't know each other. And in a past life, I worked at an organization where we had 2 divisions, and those divisions often had sites in the same town, but the people necessarily never met. And so we had this ridiculous, silly little objective of, can we make these people go say hello to those people? And vice versa. So at least they start those conversations that you're talking about, Verities. I just am more aware of what else is going on in my organization. I have an opportunity to share that there's a common problem here, and you get different perspectives. And you build a better organization, and you're better able to solve, because you understand that person's world a little bit. I've seen so many stupid messages come out from head offices that just don't appreciate what field people have to do often, because they've never been in the field. They've never stepped into that role just to understand, what is this person up against every day? And is my request to staple this report a certain way going to be valuable? And it's just really making sure that people create those connections and create that understanding to be able to solve those problems.
I think you're really onto something too with that idea of combining those different perspectives. There's a quote. What is it? What's the best way to eat an elephant? It's I'm really butchering my thing here. I'm combining 2 stories. I feel like I'm going down the same McDonald's rabbit hole as last episode. But essentially,
the best way to eat a Big Mac
before this show.
Can we not eat elephants, guys?
Yeah, no elephants being eaten. But like there's a meme, or I don't know what it is, where there's all these perspectives of the elephant, and no one quite knows what it is because they're so close to it. And the only way you can actually see what it is by zooming out. I'll find it. I'll put it in the comments.
Oh, it's the one where it's like one person thinks that an elephant is like a snake because it's only feeling the trunk, and one of them feels like it's like a tree because it's feeling the leg. And yeah.
Thank you for helping explain my analogy. But I think that, like, in organizations, everyone's been so hyper focused on efficiency of very specific tasks, especially as organizations get bigger and bigger and bigger. They're like, okay, here's the widget, here's the button you press, 400 times a day. Do not press any other buttons. Press this button and get really good at it. And I think that siloed nature is did create some bursts of efficiency. But as you start to get towards a new world where all of a sudden you can have a machine or AI or whatever it is, press that button faster, more consistently, the ability to be able to see all the buttons and is really important, and the ability to zoom out and to Tim's point, see all those different perspectives is critical in order to be able to actually start to move forward, because the button pushing is the thing that's going to get automated.
Right.
Yeah,
And
so I just
sometimes-
want to bring some, I guess, my perspective on that too. We are all, Tracy, we are all problem solvers. I think what's important to identify is, what is the nature of the problems that we're solving on a day-to-day basis. It all, depending on your skills and experience, you may be solving more day-to-day stuff rather than your big strategic visionary stuff. So when you're looking at your problem, if you kind of think of a quadrant where you have, the size of problem on one scale on one side, and then on the other axes you have the impact of the problem. Are you looking at big problems that have a wide impact, and people with more experience would play more in that quadrant, and that's what we call the big S of strategy. And so when you're solving those problems, it's very much different than solving a small problem that impacts very little people or little stakeholders. And what I'm finding right now, I'm actually diving into this AI space and the use of AI agents. And what we're finding is that these AI agents are quite powerful, and we're able to automate close to 100% of workflows right now using AI agents. And that's going to put a lot of jobs. It's going to impact the workforce significantly. And like, we're piloting it, and it's having a huge impact on my business. And I'm excited for it at the same time, but I'm also worried for the labor market.
Yeah, I feel like our episode is creating more uncertainty now. I feel like we've had the opposite effect of what we were trying to do. We've harmed elephants. You're creating uncertainty. This is a terrible.
We didn't promise to remove uncertainty. We promised to master uncertainty.
Yeah.
Which means if you're going to master anything, that means you have to practice with more of it.
There we go.
Really. I think it's so we got a couple of Bala is sharing in the comments here about if we all, organizations, communities, individuals, and families, have a 3 or 5 year plan, even if it gets revised constantly, we can all be more certain than without such transparency. And I think this might be Wendy again, or it might be another mystery LinkedIn user. If it's another mystery LinkedIn user, please let us know who you are. And the question is, how do we get individuals and teams to think more strategically so they can start solving the most impactful problems in their day-to-day? So I think this references your quadrant, Juan, is like, how do we identify what those most impactful problems are? And then how can we, shall we say, inspire individuals and teams to move forward and make a dent in that?
Do you want me to answer that?
I mean, it's your quadrant. So do you want to take a first squad, and then we'll see where it goes?
I think it's important to have the right leaders in place to drive the discussions. The leaders who have the experience and the vision can ask questions to get people to really think about what it is that's happening, what's going on. And it's a great opportunity to have the full team engaged on solving a common issue that's potentially could be an existential crisis for the organization, right? And whether or not you take the input to the next stages and implementing it or not, that's another thing. I think what's important is just allowing people that opportunity to think beyond the confines of what they see on a day-to-day basis. So I think it'll start with the tone at the top, the leadership group. And if the leadership group doesn't have the experience, that's when you want to bring in the professionals, maybe the fractional professionals, to bring a different angle. Maybe sometimes it's not even like, maybe it's not your experience. Maybe it's just having a fresh outsider's perspective that makes the world of a difference. So, yeah, I think that's where it starts.
I think being able to have a conversation is huge. Tim.
I like to use the variation of the start, stop, continue exercise with my teams. And I always had 3 questions: what's working, what's not working, and what are we going to do about what's not working? And it was the we that was always the important part. And that last part is, sometimes I've been in those things and you hear, well, this department's not doing that, that department's not doing that. And I never wanted to come out of it with a bunch of complaints. I wanted to come out of it with action. So if there's something not working, who's going to go have a conversation and find out what we can do differently about it? And come from that place of growth mindset of there's always two perspectives to a problem, well, usually three. There's mine, yours, and the truth. But it's creating those conversations like you were just saying, Kwan, about asking questions, figuring out what the solutions are collaboratively as a group. The leader doesn't have all the answers. The people do. Create that environment so that they're able to talk about those problems and solutions.
And sometimes you need to go pull them out too. Like I feel like, I see this, my perspective a lot is in kind of IT change and technical change projects where, sometimes you do have this group that kind of sits behind a curtain and surmises all the things that are going to be great for the world and then rolls them out with this big unveiling without ever talking to people. And I think that it's, that user change management and that ability to get those stories from the people that are doing the work and are on the front lines is the most important part of some of these change initiatives. Like it's really easy to going to pontificate all the things that you can do, but until you get the real context, the real stories, and mesh them with that strategic vision, I think that's when the magic really happens. And a lot of organizations skip that step because they're afraid to create uncertainty by asking the questions. And I think that it's a big miss that to your point, Tim and Kwan, like misses a huge perspective.
Yeah, I want to say I was at an organization before where the culture of the company didn't really encourage new ideas, and it was really hard to raise issues, and it just didn't foster that kind of thinking. And for me, I'm always thinking of new ideas, and I want to see change. But when you're up against roadblocks and red tape all the time, and you can't move things forward, it's frustrating. And I think there's case studies of even Walmart, when they were trying to launch their their online shopping platform, they were running up against roadblocks and kept getting shut down. And ultimately what they had to do was create an entity outside of the main operating company to pull it off.
Yeah. Well, I kind of make the joke of almost the toxic positivity. Everyone talks about toxic negativity, but sometimes you can actually be too positive and get too attached to the things that exist, and be really afraid to change because everything's perfect and awesome. And it sounds like the experience that you might have been in, which is just, it can be it's good for a very short amount of time, but can run out of its runway real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't get too complacent, really, right? That's what it comes down to. And we constantly have to ask questions of like, what's working, what's not, what's tricky, what's happening, right? And we've got to continually pivot. Change is not something that you figure out, okay, this is a project and we're going to do X, Y, and Z and just set it and not ever circle back. It's continual tweaks and changes and asking questions and staying curious and involving the people that are doing the work, because that's really important too. They have a different perspective and feeding that back into the plan to change.
I think that ties back to what we were talking a little bit about disruption, and it changes expectations. So what was working pre-2020 for teams and all in the office is not working now, and we got to find that middle ground of what works for everyone involved. I was also thinking about disruption in apps that drive different types of things that you can pick up in store, have your order prepared. And it's changed my expectations for an experience. I used to get upset when there was 20 people in line. Now I get upset when there's 2 people in front of me, because I've gotten used to everything that will help me eliminate waiting in line. Expectations change. What was working yesterday might not be working today. So continually having that conversation, like you said, Vered, is so important.
Okay, I want to go over to the chat because there's a whole bunch of things happening in the
There's a
chat. Probably pique new interest from the conversation too. So William is sharing about the definition of what strategically means. I think this is a very important point. We throw the word around about like what it means to get people to think more strategically. But what does strategically mean for your organization related to your purpose? And he says it may sound silly, yet teams and organizations among individuals, or terms in organizations amongst individuals, often varies, like 100%. It varies all the time. So what does it look like to be strategic for your organization might look different than what it looks like for another organization to be strategic. Sridhar is getting into the conversation. Welcome. I feel that the leader should have the attitude to take the ownership of the process flow. It's interesting because, like, again, from an organizational point of view, everybody has a different cultural experience of what leaders are there to do. Quan, when you mentioned that leaders are there to ask questions, and my immediate response is that no, leaders are there to give us answers. Right? And it's really interesting because I actually believe you. I believe in the value of asking a good question. A good question takes us where we're trying to go. But I think a lot of times, especially in times of disruption, leaders get the role of answering questions instead of asking questions. And it would be really interesting from a uncertainty principles point of view, if part of their response to disruption was to ask more questions instead of to answer more questions. Zane is also getting into the conversation. Oh, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead, Quan.
Yeah, just where I was coming from with that is just the whole concept of empowerment. So empowering the team, giving them the opportunity, because as a leader, what is your objective as a leader? It's to me, a good leader is someone who brings up the next generation of leaders. That's how I see it. Like, you want to show up on the top of the mountain with other leaders. You're not trying to drag people along behind you to get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective on leadership. And I believe in servant, like my approach is more of a servant leadership style. So that's kind of, just to give some light or context to my perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think this also ties into what Zane is saying here about how to build solid relationships among teams and solving complex problems further leads towards accomplishing data-driven results for long-term growth. So we want to, like, if we're saying we want data-driven results, we want long-term growth, or any of those things that maybe in our episode against banning revenue goals, we talked about, there's a lot. I think it's even just interesting to define, again, like on that quadrant, what is a complex problem? And when we're looking at complex problems, such as these shifts that we're not, quote unquote, recovering from in terms of our customer experience or pickup expectations, how are we building those relationships, and what role does the leader have in facilitating, enabling those relationships to solve those complex problems? Zane also adds here, streamlining the workflow efficiency by leveraging AI. This is something that 10 years ago wasn't a thing. It is now. AI is not going away. We can try and bury our head in the sand, but we are just going to get drowned by sand. That's not going to work. And William just has some framing here. He agrees with your questions, Tim, and adds some slight variations to add more value. What's working or going well? Where are we getting stuck or plateauing? What would we do differently until next time? So again, sometimes like simple reframing from a question makes it sound like, oh, that's a question I would ask, or not a question I would ask. Do you see the red hair here popping up? Yes, there's now a small child in the room. So just as we start to wrap up the episode, what are, as we talked about a lot of different things here today. So let's go around the room and just give everybody an opportunity in this topic of mastering uncertainty and the role of fractionals. What are the things that are most important for our people to take away from today? We'll go with varied and then around.
That uncertainty is not a bad thing. It actually can be a really great thing for your business and highlight some opportunity. And as I've said probably a bazillion times before, but the problem is not yours alone. You have a team and they're resourceful and they can problem solve with you.
And I would say that your good ideas, keep moving on the things that you want to move forward. Is uncertainty doesn't mean freeze. And so it does mean adjustment, going back to the plan and saying, what do we need to adjust here? But it was a good idea before. Why is it suddenly not a good idea? And make sure that you're moving things forward that need to move forward.
I will say that if you're not uncertain, then you should be finding ways to become more uncertain. So I think that we haven't talked about it much today, but I would use the fact that you're uncertain about something as an area that you're pushing your boundaries and you're finding a new way to stretch or be uncomfortable around something. And I think that if you are in an area where you are completely certain, it means that you're not pushing yourself or your business or your team. And so I think that finding out the uncertainty and being comfortable being uncertain is a really important skill to harness and area to find yourself in.
I think for me, the biggest thing is just framing uncertainty and looking at it from a more positive and abundance mindset. And that sets the direction in terms of whether you're going to solve it as an opportunity or a challenge. I think that's the biggest thing, is just figuring out how you want to look at it, and that will define your direction.
Awesome. I'm going to share Wendy's before I go with mine, but Wendy is sharing, during uncertainty, reviewing and adjusting the strategy if needed helps the employees maintain focus on the objectives. I think that's a great point. And for me, the recurring theme for me is that if we want to talk about mastery happens through practice. We don't get masterful at dealing with uncertainty unless we practice dealing with uncertainty. And we explore, like Keith said, the principles and how we do that. And so it's, if we're even going to approach the topic of mastering something, we have to assume we're practicing it. So also, what ways can you find to practice uncertainty? If we don't want to wait for like a huge disruption, maybe there's some ways that we could start practicing mastering uncertainty today. And fun fact, friends, we actually have, as part of this episode, a way for you to manage uncertainty, because we have some uncertainty that has presented itself with a lot of the panelists during the show. And so for the time being, the Fractional Forum is going to be on hiatus. And that does not mean that the Fractional Forum is disappearing. What it definitely doesn't mean is that, like, all of the people that you've seen as part of the Fractional Forum, we are not disappearing as individual people. Just the weekly live show is just.
That sounds very ominous.
Yeah. We're not going anywhere. No one died.
Oh, wow. Okay.
People just got some contracts that are making time things uncertain right now. And Lindsay is going on vacation to Japan for a few weeks, and like, that's not uncertain. It's just awesome, but also impacts the Fractional Forum. And so I would encourage you, one of the things we always wanted to encourage with the Fractional Forum is to get into the conversation. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for getting into the conversation in the chat today, because we have so many people in the chat. That is wonderful. It makes the conversation much more robust. But just because we don't have a live show on Wednesdays at 9 a.m., which would be very certain for you, doesn't mean that the resources are not available to get into the conversation to talk about how we become solved. And how you can tap into that is through conversation. So we would love for you to reach out to us individually. We would love to continue the conversation with you, whether that's about mastering uncertainty or a specific uncertainty that you're dealing with in your business that is relevant to the areas in which we have more practice, aka perhaps more mastery. So we will not, because I always say at the end of the show, we'll be back next week on Wednesday at 9, and we won't. We will not be back next week on Wednesday at 9. But we would love to continue the conversation with each and every one of you. So get in the conversation, get into the conversation with each other. And make sure you stay there if mastering uncertainty is one of the things that you're trying to do. See, this is how I practice, folks. I have a 6-year-old who is sick and then uncertain what he's going to do, even though I have the on live sign on my door. With that, I want to say a big thank you to the panel for today, especially big thank you to Kwan joining us as a guest. Thank you so much. You added a lot of value to the conversation today. Tim, Barry, Keith, it's always a pleasure. This is Nicholas, for anybody who's wondering. 6-year-olds are actually surprisingly good at managing or mastering uncertainty. So maybe we just have to revert back to that time of our lives to get some more practice as well. With that, everybody, we hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and we'll talk to you